Okay, let's get into it. We have this just incredible stack of baking formulas in front of us.
We do.
And this isn't just a list of recipes. We are really diving into what is basically a foundational text for quick breads and muffins.
Absolutely.
We're going to be analyzing a collection of these highly sought-after formulas.
Yeah.
And they're all defined by their granular detail.
Right.
So our mission today is to treat this whole thing like an engineering blueprint. We're focusing on every single measurement, every temperature, every unique procedural instruction, all to understand the science of variation.
That is the perfect way to frame this deep dive. We are moving way beyond just simple flavor descriptions.
Yeah.
We're really going to examine the physics and the chemistry behind these baked goods.
Mm-hmm.
It's a masterclass in variation.
Yeah.
You know how these subtle shifts, whether it's swapping vegetable oil for, say, softened butter, or using buttermilk instead of regular milk, how that fundamentally alters the final bread or muffin.
Like the kosher structure, yeah.
Exactly. Our goal is to capture every single specified component of these formulas, and this is the important part, explain why that specific component matters.
Okay, so let's begin with the all-season bread, which is, I think, a perfect example of this modular baking idea.
It really is.
It's less a single recipe and more of a versatile system. It's designed to absorb almost any fruit or vegetable you have on hand.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at just the dry ingredients alone, we have a very specific, and I'd say aggressive, leavening blend that's paired with a really high sugar content.
Right.
It's 2 teaspoons of baking soda, 1.5 teaspoons of cinnamon, a half teaspoon of baking powder, half teaspoon of salt, and then a pretty substantial 2 cups of granulated sugar.
That's a lot of sugar. And that high sugar level, it acts as a tenderizer. It prevents the gluten from getting too tough, which is key.
Right, especially with the volume of things we're about to add.
Exactly. And the wet base just reinforces that moist structure. You've got 3 whole eggs, 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract, and 3/4 of a cup of vegetable oil.
And using oil here, not a solid fat, that's a choice.
Oh. It's a deliberate choice. It promotes a highly tender crumb because it coats the flour particles and it inhibits that gluten development.
And then you get the structural core. 8 ounces of crushed pineapple and 2 cups of prepared vegetables or fruits, plus 3/4 of a cup of chopped pecans or walnuts.
Mm-hmm.
Now here is where the real engineering comes in on the procedural side, and it's fascinating.
Okay.
The pineapple must be strained, but you have to save the juice.
You save the juice.
For a very specific titration, depending on which vegetable you use. They give detailed instructions for 4 different variations.
Exactly. This is where you can see the recipe writer is compensating very precisely for the moisture and the sugar content of whatever you're adding.
Right.
So if you're using 2 medium apples and they're finely grated, the recipe calls it flaked, to get 2 cups.
Yeah.
No extra juice is needed. Apples are moist enough on their own.
Okay, but what if you use a sweet potato?
Well, if you use a medium sweet potato, flaked, to make 2 cups, you must add 1 tablespoon of that saved acidic pineapple juice.
And it's the same rule for carrots. 2 medium carrots, flaked to 2 cups, and you add 1 tablespoon of the pineapple juice.
Right.
Which tells you that both grated sweet potatoes and carrots are structurally drier than apples. Or, maybe they have something in them that needs that little bit of extra acid to really get the baking soda going.
But the detail for the zucchini version is the inverse of that.
The opposite, yeah.
For 2 medium zucchinis, flaked to make 2 cups, the instructions specifically says no pineapple juice is added.
Because zucchini is so watery.
Famously watery. It provides all the liquid it needs.
This level of precise adjustment, that's what sets these formulas apart.
It really is. And finally, the bake times just show how versatile this formula is across different pan shapes.
Right. The geometry matters.
It all bakes at 350 degrees Fahrenheit. A standard 9x5 by 3-inch loaf pan needs 1 hour.
If you use a boot pan, but only with half the batter, the time drops to 45 minutes.
Which makes sense. More surface area.
Exactly. If you use shortening pans, you bake 2 of them for 1 hour. And then the smaller pans need less time. 2 7 by 3.5 by 2-inch pans. That's 45 to 50 minutes.
And the really small ones.
8 of the smallest ones, 4.5 by 2.5 by 1.5 inches, the time drops dramatically to 30 to 35 minutes. It's a complete guide.
It is. Now let's pivot sharply from that base formula to a highly specialized one, the amaretto cherry nut bread.
Okay.
We see an immediate commitment to a very unique flavor profile. The core ingredients are a half cup of amaretto mixed right into the batter.
Wow.
And 1 cup of cherries. They can be sour, canned, or Bing, but they must be halved and seeded.
And the main structure.
1½ cups of flour, a half teaspoon of salt, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, a half cup of soft margarine or oleo, as you see in older recipes, 1 cup of granulated sugar, 3 eggs, and 1 cup of chopped walnuts.
And the preparation here is a distinct two-part process.
It is.
You bake the bread for 1 hour at 350 degrees Fahrenheit.
Oh.
But the real magic is what happens with the glaze while the bread is piping hot.
Right, the application.
The glaze itself is wonderfully simple. You just combine 6 tablespoons of granulated sugar and 6 tablespoons of amaretto. But you have to set it aside first to make sure the sugar dissolves completely. Then you pour this mixture right onto the hot bread after you've poked holes in the surface.
And that soaking step is so functional. The high alcohol and sugar create a syrup that just penetrates the structure.
Yeah, it gets right in there.
It ensures deep flavor and incredible moisture retention as the bread cools. That saturated crust must be, well, it's divine, but it's a deliberate engineering choice.
It is. Okay, next up, the apple butter bread. This one gives us a deep study in fat type and acid chemistry. It's a direct contrast to that oil-based all-season bread.
Okay.
Here, the fats and sugars are a half cup of margarine or butter at room temperature, paired with 1 cup of firmly packed brown sugar.
Right, which adds moisture and that kind of caramel note.
And the spices are potent. 1 teaspoon of ground cinnamon, 1 teaspoon of ground nutmeg, and 1 teaspoon of ground allspice.
And critically, the leavening is 2 teaspoons of baking soda. That's a lot. And it's fully activated by the acid in the 3/4 cup of buttermilk. This is a classic chemical lift.
And they blend the soda into the buttermilk first.
By doing that, they're ensuring that effervescent reaction begins immediately. It's pre-activated.
This activation then informs the specific mixing technique. You cream the sugar and fat, add the egg, and then you add the flour and spice mixture alternately with that soda buttermilk mixture.
Starting and ending with flour.
The instruction explicitly says start and end with flour. The common technique, it ensures the fat and liquid systems are properly emulsified, and it prevents the batter from breaking.
Right.
It bakes in a 9x5 by 3-inch pan at 350 for an hour, serves 9 people, and it demands a 5-minute cooling period in the pan.
This is a perfect point to pause and compare that formula with the apple butter muffins.
Okay, the muffin version.
We see a major structural pivot here. The fat is reduced to a lean 1/4 cup of canola oil, and the sugar is much lower in the batter at only 1/3 cup.
So by switching from creamed butter to liquid oil and cutting the sugar, they're fundamentally altering the texture.
They are, and they compensate for those changes by relying mostly on baking powder here.
How much?
2 teaspoons of baking powder, a 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg, 1/4 teaspoon of salt, 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon, using 1 3/4 cups of flour. The liquids are just 1 whisked egg, 3/4 cup of milk, and 1/3 cup of apple butter.
So since the apple butter provides some acidity in bulk, the whole baking powder to soda ratio has shifted dramatically compared to the loaf, which was so reliant on that buttermilk.
And because it's a muffin, they don't just stop with the batter, they demand a specific topping.
For that crispy crown.
Exactly. You mix 2 tablespoons of sugar with 1/3 cup of chopped pecans, and you sprinkle that on top. We also see that signature shift to a high oven temperature.
400 degrees.
Preheated oven at 400 degrees Fahrenheit, baked for a short time, about 20 minutes or more. Classic muffin technique.
The apple cheddar bread then pivots us back to the savory quick loaf domain.
Okay.
It introduces a substantial 2 cups of shredded cheddar cheese, along with 1 1/3 cups of apple, peeled and cut into small pieces, and 3/4 cup of chopped nuts.
And the liquids?
1/2 cup of vegetable oil, 3/4 cup of milk, and 2 whisked eggs. The dry spices are simple, really relying on the cheese for flavor. 1/2 teaspoon of salt, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, and 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon.
And the pan prep is detailed, greased with butter and sprinkled with flour. Bake time is 55 minutes to an hour at 350.
That combination of savory cheese and sweet apple is interesting.
It is, but notice the structural shift again. It uses baking powder as the sole leavening agent and liquid oil as the fat, much like the muffins.
Right.
That suggests a less dense, maybe a slightly more cake-like texture compared to that rich butter-based apple butter bread.
Moving into convenience baking, we've got the apple raisin bread, which relies entirely on 3 cups of Bisquick baking mix.
Ah, okay.
This simplifies the dry ingredients enormously since the mix has flour, leavening, salt. It's all in there.
Right, it's already optimized.
They introduce 1 medium apple, pared and chopped finely, about a cup, and you combine that first with 2 tablespoons of maple flavor syrup and set it aside. Then you have half a cup of raisins, half a cup of chopped nuts, 1½ teaspoons of cinnamon, half a cup of sugar, 3 eggs, and half a cup of milk, all added to the Bisquick.
And the mixing procedure here is precise because of that Bisquick base, which is designed to react so quickly.
Shasa.
You combine the Bisquick, sugar, eggs, milk, and cinnamon in an electric mixer on low speed, scraping the bowls frequently. Then you beat on medium speed for 2 to 3 minutes, scraping often, before gently adding in the apple syrup mix, nuts, and raisins.
So you're trying to develop just enough structure before you add the heavy stuff.
Exactly. You want to support the inclusions without over-activating the leavening too early. Bake time is 55 to 60 minutes at 350.
We see another convenience base used in the apple raisin muffins, which uses a large can of fruit.
Oh, pie filling.
1 can, 21 ounces of apple pie filling. It's
Wow.
a massive shortcut. You get the fruit, the sugar, the thickened liquid all in one.
Smart.
The rest of the batter uses a half cup of oil, 1 teaspoon of vanilla, 1 cup of sugar, 2 cups of flour, half a cup of walnuts, 1 teaspoon of baking soda, 1 teaspoon of baking powder, 2 eggs, 1 teaspoon of cinnamon, half a cup of raisins, and 1 teaspoon of salt.
The use of both baking soda and baking powder there suggests that the apple pie filling is providing some kind of controlled acidity. It allows the baker to harness both chemical leavening reactions for the maximum lift. And once again, the topping elevates the recipe.
It's a standard streusel, right?
A combination of 3 tablespoons of granulated sugar, half a cup of brown sugar, 3 tablespoons of flour, and a 1/4 cup of butter.
Yes, standard streusel.
But the instruction is crucial. This streusel is sprinkled only on the muffin cups that are filled half full.
Interesting.
If you fill them half full, you're maximizing the structural exposure of that topping, letting it get crispy before the batter underneath fully rises. They're baked at a high 400 degrees Fahrenheit until a wooden pick comes out dry.
As we transition into the next section, we immediately move into ingredients that require some special handling, namely bran and applesauce, which act as moisture regulators.
Okay.
The applesauce bran raisin muffin starts with 1 cup of all bran cereal, half a cup of raisins, and half a cup of chopped walnuts. The leavening is substantial.
How substantial.
1 tablespoon of baking powder and half a teaspoon of baking soda. Whoa, 1 whole tablespoon of baking powder.
Yeah.
That is a huge quantity.
It is. It signifies the need for maximum lift to overcome the density of that bran and all the moisture from the applesauce.
And the liquid side.
It centers on 1 cup of applesauce, 1/3 of a cup of vegetable oil, 1 egg, and a 1/4 cup of milk, along with 1/3 of a cup of firmly packed brown sugar.
The mixing process here seems focused on hydrating that bran before you combine it with the flour.
Entirely. The bran, milk, applesauce, egg, and oil are all combined first. Then the wet ingredients are blended into the dry ingredients, the flour, sugar, spices, leavening, and you mix only until moist.
That wet first approach stops the bran from stealing too much liquid from the flour.
Exactly, which would result in tough, dry muffins. They're baked at 375 for 18 to 20 minutes, filling the cups 3/4 full.
Now compare that to the applesauce sugar muffins. Here, they deliberately go back to a solid fat source. 1/3 of a cup of shortening. This, combined with a much drier batter base, the liquid is only a 1/4 cup of milk and 1 beaten egg, plus half a cup of applesauce, that suggests a richer, finer crumb.
Right, and the dry ingredients call for 1½ cups of sifted flour, 1 3/4 teaspoons of baking powder, and a 1/2 teaspoon of nutmeg.
The procedural instructions really define the outcome here. The mixing is entirely sequential, not that one bowl method we saw earlier.
Right, you whisk the dry ingredients, then whisk in the egg and milk, add the applesauce, and finally you add the shortening, beating well after each addition. It's very methodical.
But the real structural differentiator is the finishing technique.
Okay.
They are baked at a moderate 350 for 25 minutes, and then immediately upon exiting the oven, you roll them in melted butter, and sprinkle them with more sugar and cinnamon.
Oh, that immediate post-bake application creates a saturated, sweet, buttery crust.
It seals in the moisture and adds a richness that the low-fat batter structure doesn't possess on its own. It's a really clever way to enhance the perceived richness without adding fat to the core batter.
It is. Next, we have a fascinating comparison between two apricot Bran muffins, which shows how small changes to liquid and standing time create different results.
Okay, version 1.
Version 1 calls for 1 cup of canned or fresh apricot and includes the zest of 1 lemon for brightness. The leavening is a half teaspoon of Arm & Hammer baking soda and 2 teaspoons of baking powder.
The initial step requires mixing milk and bran and letting it stand for a few minutes.
Right, a short soak to start the hydration. Then it bakes at a high 400 degrees for 25 minutes, aiming for that quick rise and crispy exterior.
Okay, so how is version 2 different?
Version 2 is a fundamental redesign. It uses 1 cup of dried and chopped apricots, which need more hydration, and it introduces 1 cup of whole wheat flour,
Which also absorbs more liquid.
and develops gluten more easily. The liquid base is 1¼ cups of buttermilk mixed with 1½ cups of wheat bran. And this mixture is explicitly set aside for a much longer period, 15 minutes.
So that difference in standing time is critical. 15 minutes ensures maximum hydration for the dried apricots, the bran, and the whole wheat flour.
Right. And because everything is so hydrated and the buttermilk provides that guaranteed acidity, it needs a much gentler bake.
Lower temperature.
Lower temperature, 350 degrees, for a shorter time, 18 minutes. This suggests a denser, moister, and more tender final product compared to that airy, high-bake version 1.
Now, let's look at the convenience factor again with the apricot coffee cake. This recipe relies heavily on 3½ cups of biscuit mix.
Ah, another shortcut.
The apricot source is 1 jar of apricot preserves, which is about 12 ounces or 1 cup. And the liquid addition...
Here is pure indulgence. It's all about internal layers of texture through streusel.
Right. You pour half the batter, layer it with streusel, then apricots. Then you do it again.
Yeah.
The rest of the batter, more streusel, and more apricots.
So the streusel isn't just a topping, it becomes an integrated, soft internal layer.
Exactly. And it's baked for 40 minutes at 350.
We get even more decadent with the apricot sour cream coffee cake, which involves 1 cup of what the recipe calls artificially soured cream in the batter.
That's an old term, right?
It is. It usually means milk curdled with vinegar or lemon juice, or you could just use commercial sour cream. The point is you need the acid.
And the base is rich.
Very. 1 cup of butter, 2 cups of sugar, 2 whole eggs, 1 teaspoon of vanilla, 2 cups of flour, 1/4 teaspoon of Arm & Hammer baking soda, 1 teaspoon of baking powder, and 1/4 teaspoon of salt. The inclusion is 1 can, 16 ounces, of chopped apricots.
This recipe features a highly detailed topping, which they call a coconut and cinnamon frosting, but it's really more like a heavy streusel.
What's in it?
You mix 1/3 cup of butter, 2/3 cup of brown sugar, 1 teaspoon of cinnamon powder, and a very generous 2¼ cups of desiccated coconut.
Wow.
This mixture is then smeared atop the cake after it has already baked for 50 minutes at 350.
And here is a critical procedural detail for texture. The final fascinating step is returning the cake to the oven for precisely 1 minute until it's nicely browned. That ultra-short, high-heat flash is designed to set the coconut and brown the sugar without further cooking the core of the cake any longer, and it would just be brittle and dry. It's very deliberate.
Okay, now for a dramatic turn into the savory world with the artichoke bread.
This is where the whole quick bread concept gets redefined.
It's a multi-cheese experience. 1 cup of grated cheddar, 2 cups of shredded Monterey Jack, and 1/4 cup of Parmesan. The liquid base is 1½ cups of that artificially soured cream again.
And the inclusions.
1 can of artichoke, 14 ounces, drained and cut into 4 pieces, 2 tablespoons of lemon pepper, 1 tablespoon of parsley, and 3 cloves of garlic.
And the whole construction method is built around transforming standard French bread into a serving vessel.
Exactly. You take 2 French bread loaves, cut them lengthwise, and you scoop out a cavity in the middle so the bread looks like a long shell. You save the scooped out pieces.
And those scooped pieces are the key. You saute the garlic, add sesame seeds to 1/2 cup of melted butter, and then you throw those bread pieces in to coat them evenly.
So you're making a highly flavored, buttery bread crumb base.
Precisely. Then you mix the wet and cheese ingredients, combine them with that buttered bread mix, and finally add the artichokes. This entire mixture is then dolloped back into the hollowed-out bread shells.
And you bake it for 30 minutes at 350. It's an incredibly rich, moist, and substantial presentation. A true bread casserole in a shell.
The savory theme continues with the bacon and onion bread. This recipe is all about maximizing that rendered fat flavor.
The flavor base is 6 slices of bacon, fried, drained, and cut small, and 1 minced onion.
Sautéed in the same pan.
Yes, in the same pan, using the rendered fat until it's clear. The liquid components are 1 cup of sour cream, 2 whole eggs, and a 1/4 cup of melted butter.
And the spice details are surprisingly delicate considering the bacon. It's 1/8 of a teaspoon of black pepper, 1/8 of a teaspoon of cayenne, and a 1/4 teaspoon of salt.
Right. The fat and liquid mixture is added to the drying ingredients, and then the bacon and onion mixture is folded in. The whole loaf is baked for 1 hour at 350 until the skewer comes out clean.
Our final item in this savory bracket is the bacon monkey bread, which leans heavily into convenience.
But with a surprisingly labor-intensive assembly.
It starts with 3 cans, 10 ounces each, of store-bought biscuits. The savory mix is 11 pieces of cooked and diced bacon, 1 minced onion, and a 1/2 cup of grated Parmesan cheese.
And the procedure is crucial. Each biscuit dough is divided into 4 equal pieces.
That's a lot of little dough balls.
120 total. These pieces are then coated with 1/2 cup of melted butter. You layer the butter-coated biscuit pieces alternately with the bacon mix in a sprayed but boot pan and bake for 40 minutes at 350 until golden.
And they say to serve it hot.
Explicitly. Probably because the cheese and butter would solidify pretty quickly as it cools. It's the definition of elevating a convenience product through meticulous assembly.
We now move into the classic quick bread category, the banana bread family, which provides excellent case studies in structural differences based on fat choice.
Okay.
Starting with the banana blueberry bread, the fat source is a 1/2 cup of shortening.
Which, being 100% fat, creams very well and gives you excellent tenderness.
Exactly. The inclusions are 1 cup of mashed bananas, 1/2 cup of fresh blueberries, 1/2 cup of instant oats, and 1/2 cup of chopped pecans.
And notice the leavening detail. 1 teaspoon of Arm & Hammer baking soda, a 1/4 teaspoon of salt, and it uses this non-standard meticulous measurement of 1 5/8 cups of all-purpose flour.
That odd fraction, it points to a recipe developed through trial and error. They really dialed in that perfect dry-to-wet ratio.
The procedure is specific, too. It uses that creaming method that shortening allows for.
Right. You cream the shortening in 1 cup of white sugar until airy, whisk the eggs, then you combine the dry ingredients, which surprisingly includes the oats, pecans, and the flour-coated blueberries, and then mix that into the banana mixture.
And it's baked in a square cake pan for 50 minutes at 350. That suggests a flatter, cake-like structure.
Moving on, the Banana Bran muffins introduce spice and bran density. 1 teaspoon of allspice. The key ingredients are 3/4 of a cup of brown sugar and 1/2 cup of wheat bran.
And the liquids.
3 mashed bananas, 2 whole eggs, 1/3 of a cup of milk, and 1 teaspoon of vanilla essence. The procedural note is to sift the dry ingredients into the wet mixture.
Maintaining that theme of rapid mixing to prevent toughness.
Exactly, and they bake at 375 for 25 minutes.
The standard banana bread recipe is notable for its sheer volume and moisture load.
It is. It calls for 7 pieces of ripe bananas and 4 whole eggs, which have to be beaten. That is a huge volume of banana.
Guarantees an extremely moist product.
The base is 1 cup of butter, 2 cups of sugar, and 2.5 cups of flour. The leavening is 2 teaspoons of Arm & Hammer baking soda and 1 teaspoon of salt.
Now, despite that heavy load of 7 bananas, which adds immense bulk and moisture, the bake time is relatively short.
Only 35 minutes.
At 350. This emphasizes a quick completion, likely relying on the huge volume of banana starch to set quickly once it hits temperature.
This is an excellent place to compare the impact of fat type and preparation. We have 2 distinct versions of banana chocolate chip bread.
Okay, version 1.
Version 1 uses 1/3 of a cup of melted butter as the fat source. The sugars and chips are 3/4 of a cup of sugar and 1 1/4 cups of chocolate chips. And the flour quantity is variable. 1 to 1.5 cups of all-purpose flour.
The mixing in version 1 is sequential. Mush the bananas, mix in the sugar, then the egg, then the melted butter.
Right.
Sift the dry ingredients, flour, 1 teaspoon baking powder, 1 teaspoon Arm & Hammer baking soda, 1/2 teaspoon salt, and mix until it's just incorporated folding the chips in last.
And because the fat is melted, it acts like oil, creating a thinner batter. So the baking is done quickly at 375 for just 20 minutes.
Which confirms it will yield a cakey, tender muffin with a fast rise.
Now look at version 2. This recipe changes the fat to a half cup of solid butter.
Okay.
It uses 1 cup of chocolate chips and a half cup of chopped pecans. The base also uses 1 cup of sugar, 1 whole egg, and 2 cups of sifted flour. The key difference is the mixing method.
The specific steps are all about aeration.
Entirely. You cream the butter, sugar, and egg until light and airy. Milk, 3 tablespoons, and bananas, 1 cup mashed, are mixed separately. The dry ingredients are whisked separately.
Then you fold it all together.
And bake for a full 1 hour at 350 degrees. This is a fundamentally different product. The creaming method creates a stable structure, and the lower, longer bake ensures a dense, traditional loaf texture. It's a sharp contrast with that quick, high-heat bake of version 1.
Okay, moving on, the banana coconut loaf introduces 2 highly unique flavor elements.
Which are?
Half a cup of cut maraschino cherries and a half teaspoon of almond extract.
Ooh, which complements the coconut beautifully.
Right. It also has half a cup of desiccated coconut. The leavening is a mix of a half teaspoon of bicarbonate soda and 1½ teaspoons of baking powder.
And the structural cue here is vital. The mixing instruction is to blend well until just moist to specifically avoid overmixing.
Right. When you have this much moisture and all those inclusions, overmixing can quickly lead to a tough, elastic crumb.
In the banana coconut streusel muffins, we see a calculated mix of sugars in the batter.
White and brown.
A 1/4 cup of white sugar and a 1/4 cup of brown sugar, along with 2 mashed bananas, 1 cup of desiccated coconut, and half a cup of raisins.
And the topping, which is crucial for texture, is meticulously detailed. 1/3 cup of desiccated coconut, 2 teaspoons of brown sugar, 2 tablespoons of butter, and a 1/4 teaspoon of cinnamon.
And they bake at 375 for 25 minutes. That use of both sugars in the batter is smart. The white sugar provides aeration, while the brown sugar adds that caramelized flavor and essential moisture.
Now for the banana sour cream coffee cake, we're back to that sour component as a structural agent.
Okay.
The base includes 1 cup of mashed banana, half a cup of sour cream, half cup of softened butter, and 2 cups of flour. And the 1¼ cups of sugar are strategically divided.
Between the batter and a pecan mixture.
Right. That specialized pecan mixture, a 1/4 cup of sugar, 1 teaspoon of cinnamon, and half a cup of pecans, is not just an aesthetic topping.
What do you do with it?
You sprinkle it first to cover the bottom of a bundt pan. Then you decant half the batter, sprinkle with more of the pecan mix, pour the rest of the batter, and then bake for 45 minutes at 350.
So you get a surprise layer of gooey, caramelized pecan crumble hidden in the center of the cake.
And an extra sweet, crunchy bottom crust when you invert it.
Finally, in this section, we have the best apple muffins. The apple quantity is generous. 1½ cups of peeled and diced apples.
But the egg complexity is the key structural adjustment here. It calls for 1 whole egg and 1 whole egg yolk.
Why the extra yolk?
Well, the oil measurement is so precise and minimal, 3/8 of a cup of vegetable oil. So the recipe is likely seeking the richness, the color, and the emulsifying power from the extra fat and lecithin in that yolk.
To compensate for the low overall fat content.
Exactly. The base also uses 3/4 cup of sugar and 2¼ cups of sifted flour. The leavening is a teaspoon of Arm & Hammer baking soda and 2 teaspoons of baking powder.
And they bake at a high 400 degrees for 25 minutes.
A strong push for a classic high-domed muffin top.
Moving into the berry muffins, we see an immediate structural reliance on acid components. The blackberry muffin uses 1½ cups of blackberries and relies on 1 cup of buttermilk, along with 1½ teaspoons of vanilla and a half cup of room temperature butter. Leavening is balanced with 1 teaspoon of Arm & Hammer baking soda and 1½ teaspoons of baking powder.
The mixing procedure emphasizes aeration, creaming the butter, sugar, vanilla, and eggs until they're airy and light.
Right. That creaming method, combined with the acid from the buttermilk, produces a tender crumb with excellent rise. Baking is at 375 for 25 minutes.
Okay, let's compare that to the blueberry buttermilk muffin. It also has 1½ cups of blueberries, but the leavening is slightly different.
How so?
Half a teaspoon of bicarbonate of soda, along with 1½ teaspoons of baking powder. That slightly lower soda to acid ratio might produce a more restrained, delicate crumb.
And the mixing includes a unique, almost cautionary technique.
Right. You mold a crater in the center of the flour mixture and gently pour the egg, butter, and milk mixture in.
Suggesting a desire to minimally mix the liquids and dry ingredients, but the key is the berry preparation.
Coating them in flour.
Before folding them in, the blueberries must be lightly coated in flour. This step prevents the berries from sinking to the bottom during baking. It bakes at 400 degrees for 30 minutes.
In contrast, the plain blueberry muffins simplify the fat using half a cup of melted butter and the liquid using 1 cup of milk.
Okay.
The flavoring includes a teaspoon of cinnamon and half a teaspoon of vanilla. And the procedure is simpler. Sift the dry, whisk the wet separately, and then combine, folding in 1½ cups of fresh blueberries.
What's fascinating here is the bake profile. 350 for 25 minutes. That's a noticeable drop from the buttermilk version's 400 degrees.
Right.
Since melted butter inhibits creaming and they used plain milk, not acidic buttermilk, the lower heat allows the baking powder and eggs time to provide lift without burning the outside,
Resulting in a tenderer, maybe slightly less crusty product.
Now let's examine a massive scale operation. The blueberry sour cream muffins.
This recipe is substantial.
It is 4 cups of all-purpose flour, 2 cups of sugar, 4 whole eggs, and 2 cups of sour cream. This is designed for a very large batch.
24 or more muffins, easily. And the fruit inclusion is generous. 2¼ cups of blueberries, plus the zest of 1 lemon for that aromatic lift.
The mixing detail here is critical, especially at that scale. After the sugar and egg mixture is airy, you gradually pour in 1 cup of vegetable oil.
Slowly, to keep the emulsion stable.
Right. Then you mix the sifted flour, 1 teaspoon of Arm & Hammer baking soda, and 1 teaspoon of salt into the egg mixture before adding the sour cream and folding in the berries.
Sour cream is doing 2 jobs here, providing acid for the soda and adding incredible fat and moisture.
And they bake at 400 for 20 minutes, using that high heat to achieve a rapid spring despite the dense, heavy batter. The serving suggestion is critical. Top with a sugar-cinnamon mixture before baking, and serve with whipped cream or cream cheese.
Right, highlighting the richness of the base. Okay, moving back to the bran category, the simple bran muffins are structurally reliant on 2 cups of bran cereal and 2½ cups of milk.
That's a very high liquid ratio.
Necessary for full hydration. The initial step is key. Mix the cereal and milk and let it stand for 5 minutes.
That standing time lets the fibrous bran absorb liquid and soften, so it doesn't pull moisture away from the flour during the final mix.
Then you mix in half a cup of heated butter and eggs before sifting in 1½ cups of flour, 1¼ teaspoons of baking powder, 3/4 cup of sugar, half a cup of raisins, and half a teaspoon of salt.
And these are baked at 400 for 20 minutes, leveraging high heat for a dark, crusty exterior typical of bran baking.
The brown sugar nutmeg muffins build on that bran foundation with intense flavor. 2 teaspoons of fresh nutmeg and 1½ cups of brown sugar, again using 2 cups of bran cereal.
And this recipe stands out because of its precise process involving flour division to create a 2-in-1 batter and topping.
Right. They call for 3 cups of total flour. You first sift the brown sugar and 2 cups of the flour, and then you cut 3/4 cup of butter into this dry mix until it's crumbly.
And then, crucially, 3/4 cup of this rich, crumbly mixture is reserved for the topping. It's a brilliant shortcut.
It is. So the remaining batter base has the last cup of flour, which is then mixed with half a teaspoon of baking soda, 2 teaspoons of baking powder, the fresh nutmeg, and half teaspoon of salt.
And they bake at a lower 350 for 20 minutes, topping each muffin with a teaspoon of that reserved mixture before baking. The lower temp prevents that high sugar topping from burning.
Finally, in this section, we transition entirely to corn products with the buttermilk corn muffins.
The structure here is meticulously balanced between 3/4 cup of cornmeal and 3/4 cup of flour, using 1 cup of buttermilk.
Right, the cornmeal provides grit and structure, while the flour provides the binding.
And the leavening and sugar are very specific and minimal. 2/3 of a tablespoon of baking powder and 1/3 of a tablespoon of soda, along with a small 1 tablespoon of sugar.
That low sugar content tells you this is meant as a savory accompaniment, not a dessert muffin.
And it bakes at that characteristically high temp, 400 degrees, for a short 15 to 20 minutes, which is necessary to set that cornmeal structure quickly.
We save some of the most specialized and unique formulas for this final deep dive, where ingredients take on really fascinating structural roles.
Okay.
Let's start with the candy apple muffins, which is designed for high yield. This recipe makes 36 pieces of mini muffins.
Mini muffins.
The flavor base uses a 1/4 teaspoon of ground nutmeg, 1 teaspoon of vanilla, and 1 cup of chopped apple, baked from a batter with 2 cups of flour and 1 tablespoon of baking powder.
The structural focus here is entirely on the glaze. It requires half a cup of packed dark brown sugar and a half a cup of honey, along with 3/4 of a cup of finely chopped walnuts for the coating.
The instruction is to boil the honey and brown sugar on medium-high flame, stirring until the sugar is dissolved. So you're basically creating a quick, high-sugar caramel coating.
And the critical temperature detail ensures maximum adhesion. You must dip the muffins while they are still warm into this mixture and then immediately roll them in the nuts.
If they cool too much, the glaze won't stick properly.
And if the glaze is too cool, it'll be too thick. The synchronization of temperatures is crucial.
Next, we have the cappuccino muffins, which is clearly a 2-part recipe with a sophisticated separate spread.
Okay.
The muffin flavor base relies on 2 tablespoons of granulated instant coffee dissolved in 1 cup of milk, plus 3/4 of a cup of miniature semi-sweet chocolate chips and 1 teaspoon of cinnamon.
And the separate espresso spread is where the artistry lies. The ingredients are meticulously detailed. 4 ounces of diced cream cheese, 1 tablespoon of sugar, 1/6 of a tablespoon of granulated instant coffee, a 1/4 cup of miniature semi-sweet chocolate chips, and 1/6 of a tablespoon of vanilla extract.
These ingredients have to be blended well in a food processor or blender, then covered and refrigerated. You serve it chilled with the warm muffins.
That richness of the cold cream cheese spread provides a textural contrast to the warm, aromatic, slightly bitter coffee muffin. It's a high-end cafe experience.
And they bake at 375 for 17 to 20 minutes.
Pivoting back to savory, we encounter the caraway onion muffins. This is a deeply savory profile relying on 1 3/4 tablespoons of caraway seeds and half a cup of minced onion.
And the preparation starts with sautéing the onions and seeds with 2 tablespoons of melted butter until they're soft and a bit brown. This activates the caraway's aromatic oils.
The liquid base for these muffins relies heavily on dairy. 1 cup of sour cream, 2 smoothly beaten eggs, half a cup of milk, and a 1/4 cup of oil. The sour cream provides the acid and moisture needed for tenderness in a savory muffin.
And they're baked at 350 for 15 to 20 minutes.
The cherry almond coffee cake is another high-end recipe, specifically detailing the fat. 1 stick of oleo or butter at room temperature. The extracts are precisely measured. 1/3 of a tablespoon of vanilla and 1/6 of a tablespoon of almond extract.
The sour component is 1 cup of plain yogurt or sour cream. And the major inclusion is 2 cups of cherry pie filling.
The procedure requires a specific swirling technique in a greased 9-inch springform pan. You layer some batter, add a cup of cherry filling, swirling it with a spatula, then pour the rest of the batter and swirl in the rest of the filling.
And you drizzle half a cup of sliced almonds on top. This internal swirling creates pockets of gooey filling without collapsing the cake structure.
And the doneness test is specific. A wooden stick should come out without sticky crumbs, and the cake must cool for 15 minutes before the pan sides are removed to ensure it's firm.
We have another cherry muffin, the cherry almond muffins. This uses 6 tablespoons of unsalted butter at room temperature and a large dose of flavor extract.
How large?
2/3 of a tablespoon of pure almond extract. The fruit is 1½ cups of sweet, fresh pitted cherries. The eggs are added 1 by 1, beating until thick. And the filling instruction is vital. Fill the cups just at par with the pan to achieve a specific, controlled dome.
The cherry muffins recipe, however, introduces classical baking complexity by requiring the separation of 3 eggs yolks and whites. The fruit source is 1 cup of cherry preserves, and the liquid is 1 cup of sour milk.
The procedure dictates creaming the shortening and sugar, adding the beaten yolks combined with a tablespoon of water. The dry ingredients and sour milk are added alternately, the preserves are dropped in, and finally,
the whipped egg whites are folded in last. Folding in whipped egg whites, a meringue, is a classic structural move designed to incorporate maximum air for lift and lightness. It's compensating for the density of the preserves and the heady liquid base.
And they bake at a high 400 degrees, ensuring that delicate air-infused structure sets quickly.
Now for the chocolate applesauce raisin muffins. The chocolate source is a 1/4 cup of unsweetened cocoa combined with 3/4 of a cup of applesauce as the primary liquid.
And the spice profile includes cinnamon and nutmeg. Key mixing detail. You mix the cocoa and softened butter first, creating a chocolate fat slurry. Then you add the applesauce.
Combine the wet with the dry ingredients, including 1 1/4 cups of unsifted flour, a 1/4 tablespoon of baking soda, and a 1/4 teaspoon of salt until moist, then fold in half a cup of raisins. This recipe creates exactly 12 muffins.
The chocolate chip cherry muffins balance a sugar blend for flavor depth. A quarter cup of packed brown sugar and a quarter cup of granulated sugar.
The inclusions are half a cup of maraschino cherries and a massive 2 cups of chocolate chips total. After mixing 1 3/4 cups of chips into the batter, the instruction is to reserve and sprinkle the remaining quarter cup on top before baking.
Let's address the high sugar variability in the two versions of the chocolate chip muffins. Version 1 is notable for its apparent sugar discrepancy.
Right, we have to report it as written.
Half a cup of sugar is listed in the ingredients, and 1½ cups of sugar is listed later in the instructions, likely totaling 2 cups of sugar for 2 cups of flour.
That extreme sugar ratio would lead to an incredibly tender, almost cake-like muffin. The technique focuses on whisking the egg till frothy before adding the oil and milk. They bake at 375, filling the cups only 2/3 full to reduce spillover risk.
Version 2 uses a more moderate sugar ratio, 3/4 of a cup, and introduces a unique liquid blend. Half a cup of vanilla yogurt and half a cup of milk.
Mixed with a half cup of creamed butter, 1 cup of chocolate chips, and half a cup of coarsely chopped walnuts. The yogurt adds both acid and a unique, creamy texture. They bake at a lower 350 for a shorter 15 to 18 minutes.
And here's the recipe that demands a full-stop analysis. The chocolate orange muffins. This recipe includes a truly unexpected ingredient, half a cup of mayonnaise.
I was waiting for this one. It's a brilliant structural hack. Mayonnaise is fundamentally an emulsion oil, egg yolk, and acid already whipped and stabilized.
So by adding half a cup of mayonnaise, the recipe is supplying a highly stable source of fat and egg structure, eliminating the need to cream butter or oil separately.
And the acid from the mayonnaise, combined with the half cup of orange juice, ensures maximum activation of the baking soda.
The mayonnaise is combined with vanilla, the orange juice is added slowly, and after baking for 15 to 18 minutes at 375, 1/3 of a tablespoon of powdered sugar is drizzled on top. This is a masterful example of using a convenience item for pure structural engineering.
The chocolate raspberry muffins also feature an elaborate preparatory step. It requires 2 cups of sifted self-rising flour, so the leavening is already in there.
But the raspberry preparation is highly labor-intensive. 15 ounces of canned raspberries, undrained, are boiled for 12 minutes until a mixture becomes like jam.
And crucially, they instruct the baker to avoid stirring to prevent crystal formation. This has to cool before use.
This pre-reduction step ensures the raspberry mixture is thick enough not to destabilize the batter, concentrating the flavor without adding excess water. The liquids are 3/4 of a cup of buttermilk and 2 ounces of melted butter.
Let's look at the cinnamon chip muffins, which use 2 cups of all-purpose biscuit baking mix as their base. The flavor star is 1 cup of cinnamon chips. They bake quickly at 400 degrees for 15 to 18 minutes, very fast, high-heat formula.
The coffee cake muffins showcase a meticulous ingredient division focused entirely on the topping experience. 1 cup of sugar is divided, half for the batter, the rest for the cinnamon topping.
The topping procedure is what defines this recipe. You dip the warm muffins into 1/3 of a cup of melted butter and then immediately into that cinnamon sugar mixture. It's that same finishing technique, but with a coffee cake flavor profile.
The coffee coconut muffins rely on a liquid component of half a cup of strong brewed coffee, plus vanilla and almond extracts. The inclusions are 3/4 of a cup of coconut and half a cup of chopped pecans.
And the recipe has a large baking variance. 25 to 35 minutes at 375, which is unusual. It suggests the final time depends heavily on the moisture content of the coffee and coconut you use.
Finally, we round out the corn muffins. The simple corn muffins use a perfect 1-to-1 structural ratio, 1 cup of cornmeal to 1 cup of flour, with a 1/4 cup of melted shortening or oil. High heat, 400 degrees, for 15 to 20 minutes.
The cornmeal cheddar muffins are structurally more complex and savory. They use a cup of shredded old cheddar, a 10-ounce can of creamed corn, a cup of buttermilk, and 1/6 of a tablespoon of baking soda.
They bake for a longer 25 to 30 minutes at 400. That creamed corn necessitates the longer bake to properly set the high moisture content.
And the final recipe, the corny bacon muffins, is the most deeply savory. It uses 6 slices of crispy crumbled bacon and requires setting aside a 1/4 cup of the bacon drippings for the liquid mix.
A genius move to ensure the bacon flavor permeates the entire batter.
It also includes half a cup of corn kernels and 3 tablespoons of sugar. The liquids, egg, milk, Bacon drippings and kernels are beaten separately before combining with the dry mix and crumbled bacon, baking for a quick 15 minutes at 400.
So we have completed our exhaustive analysis of these 50 formulas. What stands out to me across all of these is the crucial role of fat type as a structural determinant.
Absolutely. Whether it's the creaming ability of softened butter, the tenderness from oil, or the use of mayonnaise as a pre-emulsified stabilizer, the fat dictates the crumb.
And we consistently saw a highly strategic choice in leavening agents. Those specific call-outs for Arm & Hammer baking soda versus generic baking powder, it all depends on the presence of an acid like buttermilk or sour cream. These writers were truly titrating their batters.
They were. And the strategic use of convenience products like Bisquick or canned pie filling often served as a stable, predictable base that allowed for the introduction of highly complex flavor inclusions like the artichoke bread's cheeses or the bacon monkey bread's layering.
Absolutely. This deep dive demonstrated that baking mastery isn't just about general ratios, it's about tweaking these specific details. From the precise 1-minute return bake to set a coconut topping, to using 7 mashed bananas for maximal tenderness. The instruction set is the final arbiter of texture and flavor.
We've explored the intricate balance and precision of these formulas, often relying on temperatures between 350 and 400 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, consider the impact of altitude on these recipes. Given the precision we've seen, especially that high 400-degree setting common for muffins, how drastically would that shift from 350 to 400 change the texture when atmospheric pressure is lower? What adjustment would you make first? Flour, liquid, or leavening, to ensure the structure holds and doesn't collapse under rapid low-pressure expansion?